Ryan Scott, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. I'm really looking forward to having you on here today for you to kind of share your story. Like we talked about before I hit that record button, first administrator this season, won't be the last. So I'm looking forward to having everybody who's listening hear what somebody on that side of the table has to say about these 21st century skills, these core competencies that we'd love to talk about. And before we get into that, Ryan, before we learn a bit more about yourself and the amazing work that you're doing with students at your school, I'm going to start this podcast with the same question that I ask every guest. It's probably the most important question that you're going to get asked today, and it really helps us set a bit of a tone for the rest of the interview. It's also, quite frankly, the question that our listeners want an answer to. So with that, Ryan, when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no on that one?
I am a heck yes. I love pineapple on my pizza. In fact, my oldest works at a pizza joint in Henderson, Kentucky, and she had the privilege of designing her own pizza. And it's a pineapple pizza, but it's got a ranch sauce. And like I'm telling you, it is divine.
Yeah. No, you are preaching to the choir. I'm happy you're pro pineapple, Ryan. You're in the majority. Our listeners are on board. Woo. Yeah. So let's get into the fun stuff. Ryan, give us some background. Who are you and what are you doing for work right now?
Yeah, so I am Ryan Scott. I'm a proud girl dad of 4 daughters, 17, 9, 6, and 4. But I'm also a dog dad, and I have 2 dogs. I've got a English Mastiff, Houston, who is about 180 pounds. And then I've got a brand new Australian Shepherd named Dallas, who is my hiking partner. And then outside of the family stuff, I'm an assistant principal at a high school in rural Western Kentucky, Dixon, Kentucky, to be exact. And then for all those listeners out there, I'm going to give a shameless plug. I'm also the host of the Big Ed Idea podcast, which our stated purpose is to connect the vision of one with the passion of another. So that is me in a snapshot. And if anybody wants to know a little bit more, do not be afraid to reach out.
Fantastic, Ryan. And we'll link to your podcast in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no kidding. So Ryan, like we talked about before we jumped into this, season 1 of this podcast was focused more on talking to industry professionals, the CEOs, the hiring managers of the world, asking them what those 21st century skills, these core competencies look like in the workplace, what they're looking for from potential applicants, and what those skills look like in action. We have a pretty good taste of the types of skills and competencies that industry is looking for. Now we've brought it back to the classroom, and we're talking with educators like yourself who are doing an amazing job of helping to empower and develop those skills in their students. So Ryan, you're obviously not a classroom teacher per se right now, but can you, for everyone listening, can you share an idea, a story, or something happening in your high school that you guys are doing to help develop these skills in your students?
Yeah, so maybe if you're okay, I'm gonna take it back to when, not that my high school is not doing something, but the thing that's really on my mind and that I'm really proud of is I was an elementary teacher for 10 years. I taught the gamut from kindergarten to 5th grade. Probably my favorite was kindergarten because I'm a firm believer that kindergarten, especially in the United States, should be the great equalizer. And because of lack of universal preschool, a lot of the times it's the great divider. So what I really tried to do within my kindergarten class is kind of lay the foundations of all of those competencies. And it was amazing the number of kids that I had come into me that just couldn't pay attention, not because of a chemical imbalance or anything, but quite honestly, they'd never been taught to pay attention. And as a middle-class dad, I kind of take for granted, that without even knowing it, that's what we teach our kids. But there's a lot of our students that come to us with a pretty profound deficit of social and emotional intelligence and stuff. And so one of the things that we would do every morning during morning meetings is I called it the attention challenge. Not a very awesome name, but that's what we called it. Mm-hmm. And it just started out, kids were sitting on the floor at my feet. I would start a timer at the beginning of the year and we would do 30 seconds. And the kids had to keep their eyes on me for 30 seconds. And if they were able to do so, the boys won a shot of Axe body spray and the girls won a shot of whatever perfume I could scrounge from my wife's closet or whatever for that day. And then the intention was every week we moved it up like 15 or 30 seconds up to how old they were, because research shows you can only pay attention to how old you are, and I think that tops out at 25. So by the end of the year, I had this whole class being able to keep their eyes focused on me for 5 minutes. And that kind of goes back to my belief that psychology needs to play so much more a role, and maybe even before pedagogy. But then at my current high school, something that we are doing really, 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 really awesome, which I'm very proud of our English department this year. As part of an exit ticket or exit requirement for our seniors, they had to do a legacy project.
Cool.
And so every senior had to come up with a service project within the community to kind of build that base of empathy, because I would absolutely argue that empathy is a 21st century skill, whether or not it's one of those 5 C's that we talk about a lot. But just to listen to some of the projects that these kids came up with, sometimes we don't give our kids credit, but if you get out of their way, it's pretty cool what they can do.
That is so cool, Ryan. And there's a lot to unpack there. And yes, I agree. Empathy, to me anyways, and I'm biased, but again, from talking to everybody I finished talking to in season 1 and now season 2, it comes up every single time. So I almost think it's a prerequisite. Nothing exists without empathy, right?
Sure.
And I love that. I love that idea with the kindergartens. I mean, I think there's a lot of adults that could benefit from a similar type of exercise, both with the attention and the the acts. But that is fantastic. So one of the guests we had on season 1, her name is Alana, and she started a company called 21 Toys that actually have developed toys. They say from age 6 to CEO to help teach empathy, and they have a new failure toy, and they're coming out with a few other ones. And she kind of talked about, and I can't remember the individual's name who kind of created the idea of kindergarten, the German philosopher back in the day. Sure. And she talked about all the benefits that come out of kindergarten, and that understand that play works, but for whatever reason, we've just decided to stop that in kindergarten. And what could that do if we just kind of kept play as part of our day-to-day moving forward well beyond the age of 6 years old, right? So
I completely agree.
Yeah, that's such a, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, Ryan. So congratulations. Because of that story, you've just been promoted to superintendent of the school board for the next 10 minutes or so. Yeah. But you're going to have to get to work. So you've been tasked with deciding one of these competencies, one of these 21st century skills, and you may have just alluded to it, but all of your grade 12 students now have to display evidence of that one skill in order to graduate. Which skill would that be?
So that is a really hard one. But one thing I think this world sorely needs is collaboration. I know you're a little north of the border, but down here in United States land, it doesn't seem like working together is very popular these days. In fact, I think those that try to work together get a bad rap. And I really try hard to have conversations with our kids and our teachers about we need to be having these tough conversations about difficult concepts in the classroom, teaching kids how to disagree, how to work across the aisle. So what I would love to see is that as an exit project or as some type of, like you said, exit requirement, I want some kids that have polar opposite opinions on a subject to kind of get together and figure out how can both sides make consensus on moving something forward. So like my idea, okay, so you have some people that are totally against the welfare state, and then you have some people that are in favor of it. Okay, so how do we pull these two ideas together to somehow decrease poverty? And, there are all kinds of contentious debates that you could put a pro and a con, and you've got adults to help them through it. And I think it'd be very interesting to see just what they came up with.
You're right. And it's a great answer. And kind of like we just talked about before, empathy is baked into that, because you can't be a great collaborator if you can't really make an effort to get into the other person's shoes, right? And it just reminded me as well of what you just talked about with what your English class is doing, the exit kind of ticket piece right now. I love the idea of making it kind of service-based or community-based, because for a lot of the conversation I've been having recently, and the light bulb's been going off for me, is that students kind of finally have that aha moment when they're working on real world projects, or when the work they're doing has a real impact, and it's not just something that necessarily has an answer at the back of the textbook. So that's huge. Yeah.
For real.
Thanks for that, Ryan.
For sure.
Okay, let's do some rapid fires for you. What's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but maybe that you wish that you were?
Financial literacy.
Yeah.
Amen. Absolutely. Bar none. We have a money skills class that I'm trying hard, really hard to make it a exit requirement.
Good. Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, yeah, it's the most common answer from education and industry. Everyone I've interviewed, it's probably like 80-90%
wow.
at this point. Yeah.
Man, I'm never, listen, no one has ever told me that I am normal. So I appreciate that.
It's a very normal answer. Yeah. Okay, let's do something not normal. You have a billboard. It's in a very populated area. Everyone's going to see it. You can write one thing on that billboard. What does it say?
You were made to be awesome. That's kind of I've got it. I don't know if you can see on I can't point to my screen, but I've got it on over my shoulder.
Oh, I do see it.
Yeah. So that's kind of the way that I live my life. I believe we are given talents and abilities, and it's a shame to waste them. And every day I try to do my very best at everything that I do. I guess, that's the short answer.
No, I love that. And you know what? That just reminded me of paraphrasing, because I don't remember the exact quote. You're talking about collaboration. Actually, it just came up recently. Sports fans listening, Kevin Durant, basketball player, and Tom Brady just agree with them that it's one of those things where if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together, right? So I love that, and I love that you have a billboard kind of already in your office.
Yeah.
Question. Yeah. Okay. IQ or EQ, Ryan? You can only pick one. Which one are you picking?
So what do you mean by EQ? Equalizer?
Emotional quotient. So social emotional, like empathy, basically. Right.
EQ every time.
Hands down, right? Yeah.
Every time.
Ryan, did you have a favorite class when you were in high school?
Yeah, biology. I started out as an aquatic biology major.
Really? Favorite animal?
Snakes.
Really?
Yeah, I had when I was a fourth grade teacher for 4 years, I had a boa constrictor. His name was Monty Python. And and when I switched schools, my wife would not let me bring him home for the summer. So I actually gave him to a student, and the student took him home. But yeah, I would love to have a snake again, but unless I get a divorce, I don't see that happening.
Snakes live a long time too, eh? They stick around for a bit.
Yes, yeah, and so do wives.
Yes, they do. Oh, yeah. Ryan, what's a book that you've read? It's had such an impact on you that maybe you wish you would have read it before you were 18.
Okay, before I was 18.
Yeah, or just a younger age.
Okay. So Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath. I ran really, really hard from the age of 16 till I was like 22, 23. I pretty much wandered in search of something, and because I was never really content. And I really, really, really like that book, because it's really, how the negatives that you think are negatives, a lot of the times you can turn into a positive. So yeah, that would be a book that I would read.
Okay, that's fantastic. We'll link to that one in the show notes. One other book you just reminded me of, and again, let's come back to your collaboration answer, interested in psychology. Author's name is Adam Grant. And I want to say this book is called Think Again. And it's just basically, he's got this idea of strong opinions loosely held. So it's okay to, have a strong opinion about something, but you have to be open-minded enough to receive new information as it becomes available, that you're not just like locked in a place.
Sure.
Good one for you to check out as well. Okay, Ryan, let's finish up. You have a magic wand, and you're going to be able to use that magic wand to change one thing about the education system as it exists today. What would you change?
Slow down. So I have this idea that, especially here in the United States, you have your primary, you have like your elementary, your middle school, and your high school. I think we try to cram way too much into each period. I wish at the elementary level we would focus more on the social and emotional, number one, the numeracy, the literacy, number two, teach kids to love to read, teach kids inquiry. Like elementary in my mind should be almost like Montessori, where we just turn kids loose and we want them to be engaged, and we teach them, we level the social and emotional playing fields. And then in middle school, we teach them how to do group projects, or we teach them the next stage, so that the goal is that by the time they get to high school, then they can get into these PBL, these project-based learning, they can get into these competencies. Because as it is now, as I alluded to earlier, a kid jumps on the education, lack of a better word, I want to call it a roller coaster or a conveyor belt.
Conveyor belt, yeah.
They get on the conveyor belt and they are 2 to 3 or 4 years behind socially and emotionally. And then we wonder why they get identified special ed before their 6th or 7th birthday. And we never slow down enough. And in here, at least in Kentucky, we have 50% of our kids that are coming into kindergarten not even ready for the standards that are written for kindergarten.
Right.
But instead of focusing our efforts on those kids, we focus on the rest of them. So I would just like to see us slow down, and we can speed up later.
You're right, man. This life is a marathon, right? So, or a sprint sometimes, but especially when it comes to learning, it's a marathon because you're lifelong learning, right? So that's a fantastic message to end on, Ryan. Thank you.
Better every day.
Hey, that's the motto. Where can everyone listening? So you talked about the podcast, which again,
Yeah.
we'll link to in the show notes, but where else? Where can people go to learn a bit more about everything you're working on right now?
Okay. So if you want to connect, I've just recently within the last year, because of all this COVID stuff, got into Twitter significantly more. And that's probably my preferred place right now.
Yeah.
So my handle is at Ryan C. Scott 1981. You can find me there. You can also search me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Instagram, I think, is Ryan Scott 1981. And then my podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, all of those, Anchor, and it's just the Big Ed Idea podcast. And again, I will selfishly plug that if there is anybody out there that wants to talk about any idea that you have in regards to education, shoot me a message, whatever, let's talk about it. The world only changes if someone has a big idea.
Oh, I love that, man. Okay. Ryan Scott, thank you so much for making time for this conversation. Have yourself a fantastic day.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.